Good morning, wrestling fans. Today is Tuesday, February 7th, 2023. I am your host, Lance Brock, here with you to discuss pro wrestling figures today. Action figures, I should say. Like yesterday, I discussed some of the wrestling video games, and actually I did get to cover everything I wanted to, so I might do kind of like a part 2 where I talk about some more of the wrestling video games again in a future episode of GMWF. Not quite sure when I will be doing that episode just yet, but stay tuned for it. But today, I thought I'd talk about some wrestling action figures. Of course, I admit I am not action figure collecting expert fanatic like Matt Cardona and Brian Myers are, but like most of us, I did have wrestling action figures when I was a kid, quite a few, and I did not do what probably would have been the smart thing at the time, which was collect them, leave them unopened, so then maybe today they could be worth something. When I was a kid, I was excited to open them up right away and play with them, put them in the ring, make my own matches, book my own shows. That's what I did, but I think a lot of kids did that same thing as well with their action figures. Like they were putting on their own shows, their own matches, and I even would do commentary too during them. And the first wrestling figures I really remember getting back long time ago when I was young, I was the WCW Galoob series. I think that was the first ones I got, and I know everybody talks about the old LJN ones, but in my opinion, those Galoob figures, maybe it's because those were some of the first figures I got. The WCW ones were, I'd have to say, maybe my all-time series of action figures. There were definitely like top 3 or something, if not the number 1 favorite. I remember having Sting, Lex Luger, Ric Flair, the Steiner brothers, or was Ric Flair in that series? Maybe not. Ric Flair might not have been in that series, actually. But Sting, Luger, the Z-Man, Tom Zink, and when I was a kid, I remember getting the double set, the tag team one of the Steiner brothers. And a little while back, the Steiner brothers did a Steiner Live on High Spots, and they actually had that action figure set for an auction. They were going to get it signed. I don't remember for sure what the starting bid was, and unfortunately I am not the richest person in the world, but I would have liked to have got that actually, but unfortunately, nobody bid on it. I know it was a high price, the starting bid. I'm not sure what it was exactly, but it was a pretty high price. But to be honest, though, for what those WCW Galoob figures go for online on eBay or any other website, if you can find them, what they go for, that's actually wasn't that bad of a deal. Like I said, there wasn't even any bids on it, so nobody took that Steiner Brothers set home, which would have been awesome to get. And I remember they even had the Bendhams at the time, WCW. Remember having Sting and Lex Luger in those. And I want to say the Z-Man, Tom Zink. I think I had the WCW ring too. And as I mentioned, I played with them when I was a kid and still have most of them now. Bruiser Brody likes playing with action figures. He plays with them right with his WWE and AEW action figures today, even though they weren't as big as today's action figures are, and you can't move them either. They were just in the same pose, except for the Bendham ones. You can move their arms and legs a little bit. Now on to WWF. I had a lot of the Hasbro ones, and everybody talks about the LJN, but some people might say shame on me, but I don't remember if I actually had any of the LJN. Hasbro definitely had a lot of them. I had Hogan, of course, Macho Man, Tantaka, even $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. I had some of the tag team sets too. I had the Rockers, the Bushwhackers. I want to say Legion of Doom is one of the sets I got, I believe. And those ones were good figures too, I liked. But I'd have to go with the WCW Galoobs. I like maybe a little better. Even though that was another thing. When I was a kid, I used to take my WCW and WWF action figures, and I was talking about how I used to kind of put together my own shows, book matches, and say, okay, take all the action figures I had, make a roster, and then make a show where I put each of them in a match. And sometimes I would even put all of them in the ring together and have a battle royal. And also, one thing I used to do sometimes was my own fantasy WWF versus WCW matchups. I'm sure everybody did that too. Even if they didn't do it with their action figures, they always had these dream matchups, WWF versus WCW at the time. I don't know if today's young wrestling fans do that now with the AEW and WWE ones, but that's what I did back then. I even sometimes used to, the dream matches, I even teamed some WWF and WCW wrestlers, had them form alliances, because in imaginary, or not imaginary, but my action figure promotion, I would have both WWF and WCW talent on the show. So sometimes I would team WWF and WCW wrestlers together to take on another WWF and WCW guy. And then when I got older, I didn't get as many action figures, but I would still pay attention to them. I would still follow which ones were coming out, look at them at the store just to see which ones they were coming out with, what they looked like now. And in the 90s, kind of like the late 90s or so, Attitude Era time, WWF was with Jakks Pacific. Those didn't look bad, but I don't know, they weren't really like the old ones. And like I said, I didn't get any of the Jakks Pacific ones. But WCW, I don't remember the brand right now that they, like around that time, late 90s, what brand they were made by, but they were made by a different brand, and they didn't really look as good either, but maybe it's just me, and I liked what I had when I was a kid, so that could be it. And now Mattel is making the current WWE action figures. I think some of them kind of not that great, but some of them for the most part do look very good. I have bought some of them for Bruiser Brody, and also some of the AEW figures as well by Jazzwares. He has the AEW ring that he loves to play with. Like I said, some of my older WCW figures too he plays with. And also go back a little bit around, I want to say maybe 2006, 2007, maybe around that time, TNA came out with some action figures. They were actually made by Marvel, I believe. They had, I don't know, maybe a few series. I did get a couple of them just to have, and I even got in one of my brown bag specials that Don West sold me online. I had a Hulk Hogan TNA action figure that came in there. But so far that's my experience with pro wrestling action figures. Now I get them for Bruiser Brody, and I do have a few signed ones from High Spots. I got Bret Hart, Sasha Banks, and I don't know why I'm blanking on the other one for some reason. I have no idea why I can't think of who the other one is, but see, that's what happens when you get old. Definitely Bret Hart and Sasha Banks. But if I remember on a future episode, I'll just come out all of a sudden and say who it is. But last night, remember, 360 Wrestling Fanatic did a new episode talking about last night's WWE Monday Night Raw, the promo segment that I enjoyed very much. Cody Rhodes and Paul Heyman. If for some reason you missed that segment, definitely check that out. I'm sure you'll enjoy it as well. But that's all for this episode. Good morning, wrestling fans. Thank you for tuning in here on Spreaker or wherever you are listening. Stay tuned for more episodes of 360 Wrestling Fanatic. Kind of a special episode coming up next, because it will be episode 360 of 360 Wrestling Fanatic. And not sure just yet when that will be, but stay tuned. I will be back here tomorrow morning, though, for GMWF. Thanks again. Hope everyone enjoyed Monday Night Raw last night. Hope everyone has a great Tuesday. Until then, keep watching pro wrestling.